Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Safety Committee. I am Mark Conway, Chair of the committee and representative of the 4th District. Before we begin, I want to let everybody know that today's hearing is going to be translated simultaneously into Spanish, and I'd ask that everyone speaking today slow down just a touch so that we can assist with translation. Those online can access simultaneous translation by clicking on the globe button on the bottom left corner of WebEx if you're on a computer, or you can do that by selecting Spanish at the bottom of your phone's screen. And we have simultaneous translation technology available for anybody in the chamber who would like to make use of it. It's available in the back. Joy from MEMA is here to support. Joy, if you are around, can you please raise your hand? Joy is in the back. Thank you, Joy. In addition, we have 2 translators in the chamber for individuals who would like to testify in Spanish. If they could please raise their hands. Thank you. And 2. If you would like to testify in Spanish, please let one of our translators know when you make your way up to the podium right here. Finally, in addition to public testimony that we'll hear today, anyone can submit written testimony on www.baltimorecity.gov/city-council. I am joined here today by members of the committee, Vice Chair Zach Blanchard of the 11th District,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
and Paris Gray of the 8th District. We also have in attendance the Council President, Z. Cohen, thank you, Mark Parker of the 1st District,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
and Odette Ramos of the 14th District. Representing the Mayor's Office, we have Tyler Chanella and Isaiah Griffith. And today, the committee is meeting to discuss Bill 26-0144, Baltimore City Policies and Procedures, Safe Spaces and Communities. I will open up with a couple of remarks. Quickly, I will offer an opportunity for Councilman Parker to give us some direction in Spanish. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. For those who are curious, this is essentially repeating some of the instructions around translation for our Spanish-speaking neighbors. Buenas tardes, soy Concejal Parker. Tengo instrucciones para cualquiera quien necesite asistencia de traducción o interpretación y les repasaré ahora. Para quienes necesiten acceder o escuchar esta audiencia en español, por favor inicien sesión en WebEx. Si necesitan audífonos, levanten la mano y nos aseguraremos de que reciban un par. Si están participando en línea, deben ingresar a través de WebEx para acceder a la función de interpretación. Hay una imagen del globo allá en la parte izquierda de la pantalla para accesar a traducción. Si están aquí para testigar y necesitan servicios de interpretación, por favor regístrese e indique en la hoja de registro que requiere interpretación. Contamos con una intérprete presente que proporcionará la interpretación del español al inglés. Me gustaría pedirle al intérprete que, por favor, levante la mano. Ahí está. Gracias. Para aquellos que vayan a rendir testimonio con interpretación, por favor, hablen 1 o 2 oraciones a la vez, frases a la vez. A continuación, hagan una pausa para permitir que el intérprete traduzca en ese momento. Les pedimos que hablen despacio, por favor. Con la interpretación consecutiva resulta difícil para el intérprete traducir un párrafo completo de una sola vez. Gracias por su participación. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate you making sure that everyone can participate today. Before we begin, I want to speak briefly about the broader context that brings us here. Immigration enforcement has existed long before ICE. For most of our country's history, it was handled through civil agencies focused on processing applications, adjudicating cases, and managing the border. After the attacks on September 11th, President George W. Bush and Congress reorganized the federal government under the new Department of Homeland Security. And in that moment, immigration enforcement was pulled into a national security framework, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, was created. That decision marked a turning point. It introduced the militarization of immigration enforcement, and it placed a powerful enforcement apparatus inside a national security agency. Even at the time, many warned that merging civil immigration enforcement with a security structure built for war carried serious risks for our democracy. Today, we're seeing those risks play out. Over the years, ICE has evolved far beyond its original mission. Instead of a civil enforcement agency operating with clear legal bounds, it increasingly functions like a paramilitary force with sweeping power and very little accountability to the communities that it impacts. Under the current administration in Washington, that power is being used by a lawless president in ways that are devastating communities and undermining public safety in cities like Baltimore. Public safety depends on trust. People must feel safe reporting crimes, cooperating with police, and interacting with government institutions. When an enforcement system spreads fear across entire communities, it weakens the very foundations of public safety. In my view, ICE as it exists today has evolved into something that is incompatible with the principles of a democratic society. I believe that it should ultimately be abolished. Abolished and replaced with an immigration system rooted in due process, in human dignity, and in the rule of law. But the city of Baltimore doesn't have the authority to abolish a federal agency. That responsibility rests with our Congress. What we can do is decide whether Baltimore will provide support, coordination, or assistance with that enforcement system. This bill draws a clear line. In the absence of federal reform, the city of Baltimore should provide no support, no coordination, and no assistance to ICE beyond what is explicitly required by federal law or ordered by a federal judge. That's why we're holding this hearing today. We'll hear testimony from members of our community who have experienced the consequences of these policies firsthand. We will hear a story of a young man whose cousin was detained during routine immigration check-ins while pursuing asylum. We'll also hear testimony from a first responder who entered the Fallon Federal Building and witnessed disturbing and inhumane conditions inside the holding facilities there. We're also joined by an outstanding panel of experts, folks who know this work very, very well. Professor Elizabeth Keys and Professor Valeria Gomez of the University of Baltimore School of Law lead one of the region's most important immigration clinics and work directly with individuals navigating the system every day. Dr. Stephen Kane brings expertise in correctional health and will help us understand the medical and ethical standards that should apply when people are held in custody. We're also joined by representatives from CASA and folks from the community, folks who have long worked to protect the rights and safety of immigrant communities here in Baltimore. Their experience will help this committee understand the legal, humanitarian, and public safety implications of the issues before us today. With that, I'll hand off to Council President Z. Cohen for a few opening words from our Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to my colleagues, particularly Councilmember Ramos, Councilmember Parker, and Councilmember Gray. I want to first just appreciate the collaborative spirit in which you've undergone this legislation. And also want to thank Mayor Scott and Mima and Catalina. This is one of those moments where the entire team in Baltimore is standing united. We literally stood yesterday outside the Fallon Center with our senators, our congresspeople, our Senate president, our mayor, our colleagues, Mayor Scott, to demand an end to the inhumane treatment that we see our neighbors experience. And This is one of those moments in history where the history books are going to look back and wonder who stood up and fought and who folded. And I want to make crystal clear, along with my colleagues, that the 74th City Council of Baltimore is always going to fight for every single resident that we serve. I don't care whether you grew up in Highlandtown or Honduras, Sandtown or El Salvador, as long as you want to contribute, be a part of our city, do things the right way, you will always be welcome here in Baltimore. I'm going to speak briefly about why this legislation is so important. We know that Mayor Scott, and I want to again thank Catalina, has shown tremendous leadership. They did an executive order just the other day to support a lot of the welcoming city efforts that we have here in our city. Mayor Scott has been crystal clear that under his leadership, Baltimore is going to remain a welcoming city. But it's not about Mayor Scott. It's not about Zeke Cohen. It's not about Odette Ramos or Paris Gray or Mark Parker. We are legislators because we need to legislate. And when something is an executive order, the next mayor that comes along can always rescind it. And so it is extremely important for my colleagues and I to codify into law the things that we do in this chamber. That is quite literally our job. That is the power that we have. And so I categorically reject any argument that says there is no role for the local city council in protecting our neighbors when it comes to immigration. Let me also say this. The President of the United States made a commitment to go after the worst of the worst, and then did exactly the opposite. He went after the parents of children in my kids' school. He went after elderly folks. He went after our neighbors outside of a Home Depot or who are working at a restaurant. That does not make America safe. And in fact, the reality is that Baltimore has been driving down violent crime through our commitment to community policing, through our commitment to effective prosecution, trauma-informed care, GVRS. The strategies that we are using in the city of Baltimore are working, and so we don't need marauding ICE agents running through our streets causing chaos to keep us safe. We're proving that we can do it by ourselves without that extra effort. I'll say one more thing about why this legislation is so important. We know that we have a shared commitment across our agencies, that the leadership in BPD has been crystal clear, that the leadership in all of our communities has been crystal clear that we are not going to assist in immigration's custom enforcement. That's not what we're doing. But again, we worry that if there were ever new leadership within these agencies, that could change. And so it's important that we codify in our law what city agencies need to do. It will dispel any confusion. It will make crystal clear our expectations, and beyond our expectations, the law says that we are here to support our residents. We are here to provide city services. We are here to keep people safe. We are not here to aid in President Trump's unlawful, unconstitutional ICE actions in the city of Baltimore. We do not want what they did in Minneapolis to happen here. And so I'm gonna conclude by saying this. This is one of those moments where Baltimoreans are standing united. You see it in this chamber, which is overflowing and has folks upstairs. We see it in our streets. We see it with folks doing Know Your Rights trainings and blowing the whistle. Baltimore is a welcoming city for all people, and as long as Odette Ramos, Mark Parker, Paris Gray, and all of us are around, it's gonna stay that way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate your advocacy on behalf of the council in making sure that we do all that we can to make sure that our folks are safe in our streets. I'm going to turn it over to Councilwoman Ramos to give us an introduction. Oh, I'm not turning it to Councilwoman Ramos. I'm going to turn it to Councilman Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, colleagues. I am here today not simply as a legislator, but as a representative of every Baltimore resident who fears that the people sworn to protect them one day may be used as an instrument of their oppression. Council Bill 260144 is not radical, it is not anti-law enforcement, it is a reaffirmation of a fundamental agreement that the role of local policing is to serve and protect the people of Baltimore City, all people of Baltimore City, and not to act as a deportation force for the federal government. Let us be honest about what is happening on the ground as we speak, because this is not abstract. There are egregious documented civil rights violations occurring in cities across this country, and we'd be derelict in our duties to ignore them. Such violations as due process stripped away, as ICE agents has detained U.S. citizens, American-born residents without charge, without access to counsel, and in some cases without notifying families for days. This is not immigration enforcement. This is a constitutional crisis. They have enforced racial profiling as policy as ICE enforcement operations have repeatedly targeted individuals based on race, religion, and national origin, not on any individualized basis of criminal conduct. In Baltimore, where the wounds of discriminatory policing run deep, we know exactly what it looks like when enforcement is aimed at a community rather than at the crime. At our courthouses and our hospitals, we have arrests. As federal agents have arrested people at courthouses while they attempted to seek justice, and outside of hospitals while they sought medical care. This chills civic participation and endangers public health. It is a tactic of terror, not law enforcement. We also have family separation without legal basis as children, some of them, Baltimore City school children, have lost parents to enforcement operations that provided no due process, no judicial review, and more importantly, no humanity. And then there's the coercion of local police. When local police are deputized to carry out federal immigration enforcement, it destroys the community trust that makes effective policing possible. Witnesses don't come forward, crimes go unreported, victims stay silent, and everyone is less safe. And to be clear, history is watching. And we've seen this before. Baltimore City has a specific, painful, and well-documented history of law enforcement being used not as a shield for residents, but as a sword against them. We cannot pretend that that history doesn't shape our community experiences at this very moment. Our communities have fought for decades for police accountability, for a relationship with law enforcement built on trust rather than fear. That trust, fragile, hard-won, and still being rebuilt, is shattered every time a neighbor sees local resources used to surveil and detain immigrants instead of solving violent crimes. We cannot build safe communities when entire populations live in fear that calling 911 will result in their deportation or the deportation of a family member. Violent crime rates increase in cities where immigrants fear police contact. This is not ideology, it's data, it's a fact. This bill makes Baltimore safer. I want to go into a little bit about what this bill does and does not do. This bill does not protect individuals with violent criminal records from accountability. Public safety remains paramount. This bill does ensure that Baltimore City resources, that's our officers, our jails, our data systems, are not used in a federal deportation apparatus. This bill does reaffirm Baltimore's law enforcement exists to serve Baltimore's people. And once again, I want to emphasize all of Baltimore's people. This bill does send an unambiguous message that in this city, we do not weaponize government against our neighbors. To my colleagues and those in City Hall who may be hesitant, I understand the political pressures. I understand the federal posture, and I understand the arguments about the rule of law. But I ask you to consider, what is the rule of law for if not to protect the most vulnerable? What is local government for if not to stand between power and people? What is this council for if not to act when action is needed? History will record this vote. Let it record that Baltimore City chose to stand on the right side of human dignity. Let it record that we refuse to repeat the mistakes of those who have come before us. Let it be recorded that when law enforcement was weaponized against our residents, we said, not here, not in our city, and not on our watch. Baltimore has always been a city that fights for its people. From Frederick Douglass to Thurgood Marshall, from the docks of Fells Point to the streets of West Baltimore, this is a city that knows what it means to resist oppression and what it costs to stay silent. Council Bill 26-0144 is an act of that resistance. It is an act of civil courage. It is the right thing to do. And I'll leave you with this quote. When any government uses the machinery of law enforcement not to protect the vulnerable, but to intimidate, surveil, and remove them, it has broken faith with its very people. I urge my colleagues to vote yes for our residents, for our history, and for the Baltimore we all are still building together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilperson Gray. Thank you, Councilperson Ramos, and all those who have been part of this work. I appreciate your support and co-sponsorship, as well as that of the other councilpersons on this committee. This bill is important to meet the current moment and prepare for the months ahead as ICE's multi-million-dollar agenda of mass deportation rooted in white supremacy continues to unfold across the country and in the streets of cities like ours. This bill is an important step in our city's overall response to this federal administration's agenda of mass deportation and terror in our communities, and an important part of our city's responsibility to protect all of our residents from discrimination and fear, to stand strong together and to nurture the trust that exists between neighbors and their local government and public servants. This bill is an urgently needed response to increased and relentless immigration enforcement in neighborhoods across the city of Baltimore, including those in the 1st District, where our neighbors, my constituents, are afraid to leave their houses to go to work, buy groceries, access medical care, walk their kids to school, participate in community events or religious activities. It's also an important step to reaffirm Baltimore as a welcoming city and to better protect our neighbors, our families, and public safety. Unfortunately, things are getting worse. It's been a relentless grind all year long as the full resources of the federal government are put forward to advance this hateful and evil agenda here in our city. And the signs loom large ahead of us of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of outlays and vehicles and equipment, of new officers being trained, of conditions worsening. Things are bad, and we are responding as best we can. But the reality of what could be ahead of us looms large, and so we do everything we can now to be prepared. That includes our laws as well as the work we're doing across our city agencies and in our neighborhoods. This bill clarifies that Baltimore City will not assist, support, or cooperate with immigration enforcement actions, including when those actions are conducted by masked agents kidnapping parents outside their children's school, tearing apart families at check-ins at the federal courts or at federal offices, or conducting illegal traffic stops and violently removing residents from their vehicles or off our streets because of how they look or the language that they speak. This bill is rooted in long-standing, consistent, and principled leadership from people throughout our city, particularly our mayor, Brandon Scott, particularly Catalina Rodriguez Lima of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. This is breaking a bit of new ground, but is consistent with that strong leadership and the values of our city, which generations of leaders and people up and down city government have stood for and articulated so clearly. We do this in partnership with actions being taken at the state level in Annapolis, and at the federal level, we see today that Attorney General Brown filed suit over conditions at the Fallon Building, and so we're grateful for his work and for the work of our city solicitor and all of our partners in pushing for justice every single possible way we can get it in every moment that we can. Finally, this bill and all of those efforts, of which this is one part, are consistent with our values as a city. Times like this, moments like this, don't change who we are, they reveal who we are. And Baltimore stands strong alongside our immigrant neighbors and people of all backgrounds for justice, for public safety, and for the ability to live without fear and to pursue your dreams and your hopes for yourself and for your children in this place. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, my colleagues.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling this hearing so quickly after introduction. Thank you to my colleagues. It's been great to work with our new council members to the council. Thanks to all of you for being here today. As I've said before, this is deeply, deeply personal for me. It is horrifying to see my community members being snatched off the streets simply because they look a little different, they're a little darker skinned, and they have an accent. That is profiling, plain and simple. As the first and still the only Latina elected official in Baltimore City, I'm always in pain seeing the stories, seeing the videos, watching community members, mothers, planning for separation. Can you imagine what that must be like? And then if you're actually separated from your children. People came here to make a better life for themselves. People came here because they believed in the promise of the US. People came here because they believed they wanted to be a part of a community that honors democracy, that honors being able to be successful for yourself and your family, and to have every opportunity possible that they couldn't find anywhere else. And now they're treated exactly the way they probably would have been treated where they came from. Or they're being treated worse in some cases because of this racist, misogynist, white supremacist federal administration right now. What was voted for and who they voted for is terrorizing our communities. And what we're doing today in introducing this bill and having this hearing, and what we did yesterday with introducing the other bill, is to make it very clear, and also what Mayor Scott did with the executive order, is to make it very clear that the behavior of immigration enforcement and the federal government in our city is not acceptable. It is not acceptable. We will not stand for it. And we're being very crystal clear in this legislation what the role of our city government is to make sure that we're not a part of that, what's happening, and to the extent that we can protect our residents. And to be very crystal clear to the public what our role is as city government in this fight. And it is extremely important right now, today, for all of us to be leaders in this regard, and this is what we're doing today. All of us in the council are very, very clear about what needs to happen to make sure that our residents feel safe. It is also incumbent on all of us to get involved in some way. There's lots of opportunities to do so, and I won't take that time here, but have shared that in the past, and people can contact my office. ICE is already here. ICE is in Baltimore. ICE is terrorizing families. I can give you several examples. And it may be that there is more coming, and we have to be ready, and that's what we're doing today. So, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for taking this on. If you don't mind, I'm going to go through the bill so that we're clear on what we're doing, as well as the amendments, and then we'll go from there. But I want to thank everybody.
We'll go through the amendments after. So we'll hear the reports from everybody, and then we can discuss the amendments.
Sure. Well, when I discuss the bill, I'm going to integrate a little bit about what our amendments are, and then we can go from there. Like, for instance, covered entity, we've decided not to take out covered entity.
You can touch on it. I'd rather go into the amendments because, of course, the agencies are going to have all this feedback, and without the context from the agencies, the changes won't make sense yet. So if you could just give a brief overview of the bill, and we'll discuss the amendments after so that it makes sense after the bill reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So what this bill does is it's very crystal clear about the work of our agencies as well as the Baltimore City Police Department. And so what we've done here is basically say that every agency will work with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. This is part of our, we had to integrate into this part, the MEMA,
And
that there will
Councilwoman,
be a,
just a quick note for folks speaking, just slow down a little bit for the translation, just so everyone understands. Thank you.
it's really hard for Puerto Ricans to slow down, but yeah. I will do that, absolutely. So what we're asking is that every agency of city government, will have an immigration enforcement action response plan and work with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs on those plans so that there's consistency in the principles, but also very specific details in the in those plans. Obviously, a rec center is different than the fire department, right? So we want to make sure that those plans are consistent in principle and policy, and yet specific in their general operations. And each of those plans has to include that every agency may not, unless required by federal law or a court order. Now, we use judicial a warrant in the bill a lot because that's the only thing that's allowed that we would end up having to let the immigration enforcement in. But basically to not allowed to use any of our facilities, our information or our equipment, and every agency will have, this is all also consistent with the executive order. There's also, we're not going to be asking about, and we still don't, we haven't been, because what we're doing here is codifying the executive orders. We have not been sharing information because we don't have the information. We didn't ask. We don't ask. We never have asked for status information. We also have very clear, so there's very clear provisions as to what every agency plan would have. With those particular things in mind. We also have a very clear statement in here that discrimination based on status is prohibited. Now, if we're not asking, this shouldn't be an issue, right? That is important. And if somebody asked us for information, that's an immigration official. We don't have the information, so we won't share it. And so we have some data governance here in the bill. There's also contents of each of the plans will respond. There'll be communications protocols, signage protocols, et cetera. There'll also be training. So MEMA is going to be working with each agency on training their personnel. BPD is excluded from that particular training component, but it has the request here that the requirement that they come up with their own training because they have different procedures for that. We also have very specific items for BPD that are consistent with the executive orders, which is that BPD will not engage, assist, or support immigration enforcement actions, again, unless there's a judicial warrant, that BPD will de-escalate situations if they are happen to be on the scene, and that there is very specific reporting in this bill for all of the agencies that are involved. And so also very consistent with the executive order that if the department ends up interacting with the BPD interacts with an immigration official who is conducting an immigration action, that the department will inquire about what their business is there, and if they have a judicial warrant, request the name of the individual who's being detained so that they can share that with the next step and possibly being shared with the family, and document the interaction on body-worn camera. And I think most importantly, that they're going to be asking for law enforcement credentials. I mean, if they're kidnapping our people off the street, you know, we've got to figure out who that is. And that's what we're asking for in this bill. So that's it in a nutshell. I have some more specifics here, and we can talk more about it. But again, I just want to be very clear that this codifies what the practice is of city government and BPD already, and that, as the council president said, and my colleagues, making a clear statement by putting this in code, that no matter who is in our seats, that this is very serious for all of us, and we want to make crystal clear to everybody what the role of BPD and our agencies are, and that our agencies are willing to make sure that we're not going to have ICE in our facilities. That's not going to happen. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and happy to answer any questions from the committee, and look forward to the next steps in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any questions? All right. Today we're going to do 2 rounds of public testimony, and we're going to break it up to have testimony in the beginning, and then, as we traditionally do, at the end of committee reports. Everyone will receive 2 minutes to speak, and we'll have an opportunity for translators once again. If you need a translator, please say so, and we'll have you come up and speak. I'm going to start with some written testimony that was submitted to my office in advance of this hearing. Folks didn't always feel comfortable coming here in person, given, I think, the sensitivity around immigration. And so I'm going to take a liberty to read their testimony. I'll begin by reading a statement on behalf of the family of Mahad Adnan Roble, who is an asylum seeker who was detained during what was supposed to be a routine ICE check-in here in Baltimore. Mahad Adnan Roble came to the United States seeking refuge from war and applied for asylum. Mahad's family wanted to share their experience with the committee directly, but they were afraid to do so out of concern that speaking publicly could bring retaliation against them or other members of their family. For that reason, this statement is being read on their behalf. While his case was pending, Mahad complied with all of the requirements placed on him by immigration authorities. After several months, he received authorization to work and was issued a Social Security number. He began working at Amazon while waiting on his immigration court hearing, which was scheduled for March 2026. During this time, Mahad was required to regularly report to the ISAP Supervision Office located on 2 Charles Street here in Baltimore. And on December 12th, 2025, Mahad attended what he believed would be a routine check-in appointment at that office. And instead, he was detained by ICE agents and transferred to a detention facility in Houston, Texas. After being transferred out of state, his immigration case was suddenly accelerated. His hearings were moved forward, and the judge ultimately ruled against opening his asylum case. And during the hearing, Mahad did not have access to an interpreter. Mahad had been supporting his mother and his siblings after his father was killed in the conflict in Ethiopia. He came to the United States hoping to continue his studies and to build a better life for his family. Mahad was complying with the system and following every requirement placed on him while he was detained. His imam described him as an honest, trustworthy, and decent, law-abiding individual. Next, I'll read testimony from a Baltimore City public school teacher describing how immigration enforcement is affecting immigration students and families in our classrooms. His name is Michael Marinelli. He says, "Hi, my name is Michael Marinelli. I'm a 7th grade English teacher here in Baltimore City. I'm speaking not only to my experience as a teacher here in Baltimore, but to a reality where we are seeing across the state of Maryland. As a teacher, it is my duty to teach all of my students, regardless of their immigration status. And I also will fight for the right of all of my students to receive the quality education that they deserve. Right now, immigration students, including those I see every day in my classroom, attend school less frequently than their peers. The graduation rate for immigrants across the state has dropped since Trump's deportation machine began last year. I've seen this reflected personally in my classroom. Students' attendance has dropped, and many of my immigration students are more withdrawn from the classroom. My own student's father was detained and deported just recently. Since then, his mother doesn't let him attend after-school tutoring with me out of understandable concerns for his safety. All of our country's youth deserve the right to a quality and stable education that is free from fear. This is why I support the Safe Spaces and Communities Act to formalize non-cooperation with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Baltimore City. We must act now to ensure our next generation grows up to receive the best education we can provide. And finally, I'll read one more. It's testimony from a Baltimore first responder who witnessed the conditions inside the ICE holding facilities in the Fallon Federal Building while responding to a medical emergency. I'm speaking out as a first responder today because what I saw in the Fallon Federal Building was inhumane and immoral. I support putting an end to any and all cooperation with ICE and DHS, not just in Baltimore, but across the state of Maryland. Late last year, I was dispatched to 31 Hopkins Square to respond to someone having a seizure. I was dispatched with an additional crew who arrived there before my partner and I. Once we arrived, we were escorted to the 6th floor and brought through an office to the holding facilities. Inside the facilities, I was immediately confronted with a dirty hallway surrounded by various holding rooms and DHS employees processing people as well as sorting through their personal belongings. The hallways and the holding rooms were lined with grime, and the individual who had a seizure was lying on the floor. None of the DHS employees were displaying any concern or urgency for the individual who had just suffered a seizure. As my partner and I approached the individual, several people started to bang on the glass and ask for medical care upon seeing this. Unfortunately, and to my great shame, I was unable to help them in that moment, but I hope this testimony will do some small part. On the door to the holding room, behind the individual who had a seizure, was a whiteboard that was present on every other door as well. The board had a number written, 37, and underneath, -1. I can only assume these numbers represented the number of people in the room, and the -1 was the individual on the floor. The size of the room in question was no larger than the living room of an average row house here in Baltimore. As you can imagine, this was simply not enough space for 37 people to be sleeping, eating, and living in. The individual the dispatch was for stated he did not have access to their medication for the duration that they were holding, but they did not want any help. Unfortunately, because they were not willing to be seen, there was little we could do. We were soon escorted out by the same DHS employee that let us in and who started to brag about the fact that ICE had been grabbing 9 people a day on average since the start of 2025, and that when we get them out of here as fast as we can, it should be unthinkable to any decent person to brag about kidnapping 9 people a day, forcing them to live in squalor, and then sending them away from their families with no recourse and no trial. It was only after this that I learned ICE nationally canceled its contract with all third-party medical providers, which in many ICE facilities left no medical professionals to provide health care. The people in these cells only have access to medical care when it is deemed a medical emergency. It's only a matter of time until there's a death, like those seen in other ICE facilities. In these holding cells, due to the neglect that I and others have witnessed, the only way we can protect the people of Baltimore that are being kidnapped every day is by closing this facility and every other ICE facility in Maryland. I'm going to offer opportunities for folks to testify. When I call your name, please come up and you will have 2 minutes to speak. First, I'm going to call Professor Valeria Gomez. Please press the button on the right, and you should see it turn red.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Valeria Gomez, and I'm an assistant professor of law and the director of the Immigrant Rights and Immigrant Justice Clinics at the University of Baltimore School of Law, as well as a member of the American Bar Association Commission on Immigration. Our clinics represent Maryland non-citizens before immigration agencies, and through that work, I see firsthand how federal enforcement practices impact Baltimore residents. I testify today in my personal capacity as an immigration law practitioner, legal scholar, and Baltimore City resident. I strongly support Bill 260144 and the proposed amendments. They're essential to safeguarding the dignity and well-being of all Baltimoreans, citizens and non-citizens alike. My testimony focuses first on legality and then on realities on the ground. Baltimore has no obligation to participate in federal immigration enforcement beyond the narrow requirements in state and federal law. Immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility. The 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution affirms that states and localities control their own policing priorities, determining for themselves how to best meet their needs for public safety. Baltimore is fully within its authority when it chooses not to use its resources to assist in federal civil immigration enforcement. Public safety is best served when residents trust their local government. Relying on actual data and not harmful rhetoric, Baltimore City knows that immigrants, regardless of status, are far less likely to report crimes or cooperate with law enforcement when they fear that any interaction with city agencies could expose them to deportation. Maintaining a separation from federal immigration enforcement is essential to engendering the trust that keeps our residents safe. The realities on the ground paint a bleak picture. The Department of Homeland Security doubled its arrests of non-citizen Baltimore City residents from 2024 to 2025, and the manner of enforcement has shifted dramatically. DHS has abandoned prior policies that limit arrests at schools, courthouses, hospitals, and other sensitive locations. These tactics spread fear far beyond those directly targeted. The bill's proactive data sharing restrictions are especially critical. ICE's surveillance apparatus has expanded dramatically, and our clinic has seen the consequences. Let me briefly describe one client who's complied with every single legal requirement, and there were many such requirements, while awaiting a decision on his asylum claim. I summoned him to its Baltimore office, and despite having no criminal history and a lengthy record of full compliance with immigration law, placed him under extraordinarily burdensome surveillance, including a GPS ankle monitor that tracks his every move in real time, monthly ICE office check-ins, home visits by ICE contractors, strict geographic limitations on his movement, and the required use of a smartphone app whose privacy protections remain unverified. If he slips up once, misses an appointment, a charge fails on his ankle monitor, he faces arrest and detention in facilities well documented for inhumane conditions and medical neglect. In 2026 alone, 11 people have died in ICE custody. Distressingly, 3 people have already died in immigration detention in the past 5 days alone. His experience is not unique. It's emblematic of what many Baltimore families are enduring. To conclude, Baltimore should not add to this already extensive web of federal surveillance. ICE does not need and should not receive additional data through municipal channels. Our city should do everything within its lawful authority to avoid entanglement in a system marked by expansive surveillance, the warehousing of human beings, and preventable loss of life. Because this bill strengthens public safety, protects due process, and supports the thriving, diverse communities that make Baltimore home, I respectfully urge the council to adopt Bill 260144 as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Professor Maureen Sweeney.
Good afternoon. My name is Maureen Sweeney. I'm here on behalf of the Chacon Center for Immigrant Justice at the University of Maryland School of Law here in town, where I have taught immigration law for the last 22 years almost. We urge the council to adopt 26144 in order to protect our communities. Nothing in the Constitution or in federal law requires the city to engage in immigration enforcement or any kind of civil federal enforcement. The city's business is to ensure the safety of its community and the effectiveness of the delivery of its services. Neither of these things is helped by being confused or conflated with the kind of immigration enforcement that is happening right now. That enforcement can only be damaging to the confidence that city residents need to have in city personnel and city services. This bill helps to establish clear lines to keep the federal government in its lane and the city in its lane. That's especially important now because of the type of immigration enforcement that is happening. We are all watching the news, and we know that it is especially excessive and punitive. It targets people who are not a danger to our communities, demonstrably not the worst of the worst, but rather people who are integrated into our neighborhoods, our families, our faith communities, our schools, and have been here for years and sometimes decades. The people that are being arrested in Maryland and in surges in other cities are already in the legal process, many of them. We've heard some of those examples this morning or this afternoon. People who have applications pending with USCIS for family-based visas or for asylum, for other kinds of relief, young people seeking special immigrant juvenile status. There are people who are showing up and doing the things that they can do to comply with the process. And the enforcement that they are suffering is intended to intimidate them and to intimidate them out of pursuing their legal rights and exercising the rights to which they have access under our law. It also goes contrary, the type of enforcement goes contrary to everything that Baltimore has been trying to do in terms of increasing trust and accountability in law enforcement. It involves routine racial profiling. The wearing of masks is specifically designed to avoid accountability. And the bill's reference to the use of body cameras to try and return some of that accountability, I think, is really laudable. Excessive amounts of violence without reasonable suspicion, sweeping up everybody they find and then sorting it out later, including the arrest of US citizens. This bill is designed to, the enforcement is designed to intimidate and terrorize, and this bill will help to communicate to the community that self-deportation is not their only option, but that Baltimore City has their back. So we urge the council to vote in favor of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Montserrat.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Montserrat Alemán y soy miembro de CASA.
My name is Montserrat and I'm a member of CASA.
Can you come closer to the mic when you translate, please?
Yes. My name is Montserrat, I'm a member of CASA.
Emigré a los Estados Unidos para escaparme de la discriminación y violencia que vivía en mi país, Honduras, por ser una chica trans.
I came to the United States escaping discrimination and violence that I experienced as a trans woman in Honduras.
Vine a Baltimore porque es un hermoso lugar santuario.
Thank you. I came to Baltimore because it's a beautiful and welcoming city.
Aquí me siento más segura ya que hay muchas protecciones para los inmigrantes y para las personas LGTBI.
I feel safe here because there are many protections for immigrants and LGBTQ people.
Aquí me siento más libre en poder alzar mi voz, ya que en mi país aún no puede alzar la voz porque lo callan.
Here I feel free to raise my voice. In my country, you can't raise your voice because they silence you.
Aquí finalmente puedo ser yo.
Here I can finally be myself.
Baltimore me ha dado la oportunidad de vivir con dignidad y yo también trabajo duro para construir a la ciudad.
Baltimore has given me the opportunity to live with dignity. As a result, I work hard to give back to the city.
Trabajo todas las noches en un hospital, cuidando de que el lugar esté limpio y seguro para poder atender a los pacientes.
work almost every night in a hospital, making sure it's a clean and safe place to care for patients.
A veces después de trabajar toda la noche voy directamente a actividades políticas como la audiencia de hoy.
Sometimes after working all night, I go straight to political activities like today's hearing.
Alzo mi voz por aquellos que han silenciado y que han apagado su voz.
I raise my voice for those who cannot speak up and who have silenced their voices.
Y también por aquellos que no pueden porque aún les falta la seguridad y la protección para hacerlo.
And because they still lack the safety and protection to speak out.
Hoy en día el gobierno federal está autorizando a personas como yo, nos tratan de forma inhumana y separan a nuestras familias.
Today the federal government is terrorizing people like me. They're treating us inhumanely, tearing our families apart.
El peligro es mayor para los inmigrantes LGTBI, como lo soy yo.
The danger is even greater for queer and trans immigrants like me, for queer, trans, LGBTQ immigrants like me.
Si me deportan a Honduras, ¿podrían matarme solo por ser quien soy?
If I were to be deported to Honduras, I could be killed just for being who I am.
Es urgente que aprueben esta ley para dejar claro que el gobierno de la ciudad de Baltimore está aquí para protegerlos a los residentes, no para ayudar a ICE.
It is urgent to pass this bill to make it clear that the Baltimore City government is here to keep residents safe, not to help ICE.
Y para no aterrorizarnos y violar nuestros derechos.
Not to terrorize and violate our rights.
Esta ley envía un mensaje a los inmigrantes LGTBI de que Baltimore nos ve, nos valora y no nos va a dar la espalda.
This bill sends a message to LGBTQ immigrants that Baltimore sees us, values us, and will not turn its back on us.
Aprobemos esta ley y sigamos trabajando juntos para garantizar que Baltimore sea un lugar de refugio para las comunidades más vulnerables.
Let's pass this bill and let's continue to work together to ensure Baltimore remains a space for refugees for the most vulnerable communities.
Sé que estos tiempos difíciles pasarán, porque al alzar nuestra voz y luchar juntos, vamos a vencer el miedo y prevaleceremos juntos.
I know that these difficult times will pass because by raising our voices and fighting together, we will prevail together.
Sí se puede, mi gente.
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn over briefly to Council President Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies, I am going to have to leave. We had an officer shot today, and so I'm going to head over to Mercy. But I want to just thank everyone, thank my colleagues, thank testimony, and just conclude by saying this bill has my full support in Baltimore. Our immigrant communities and our LGBTQ communities are a blessing, not a blight. So please continue the fight, si se puede, and thank you for everyone for coming to City Hall today. Thank you for continuing to stand with this council as we push back in every way that we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to do a couple more folks. I've got Sergio España.
Good afternoon. My name is Sergio España, a proud Baltimorean and constituent of District 6 and a member of the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs Coalition. I am here in support of the passage of this bill as someone who, like many of us here, has seen the very real threat of ICE's unconstitutional practices, not just across our country, but what seems to be pretty much every day already here in our city. And that is the situation now. This is before what we all expect to be an escalation in ICE activity in Maryland and here in Baltimore. In my volunteer work, I have seen firsthand ICE apprehending fellow Baltimoreans without proper warrants, intimidating residents while running their businesses, terrorizing children, terrorizing children as they come back from school to find out that their parent is gone. I have held the hands of too many crying parents as they fill out paperwork, trying to figure out which loved one or neighbor would be responsible for their children in case they are picked up by ICE while they are at work. And make no mistake, in the overwhelming number of these examples, there has been no justification besides the need for our current fascist federal government to scapegoat immigrants and minorities, regardless of a lack of criminal history. If we do not push back against ICE, make no mistake, they will only be further emboldened to terrorize all of us and to further undermine our constitutional rights. This bill is a meaningful step in the right direction to help all of our residents know that they not only belong in our city, but that the public institutions that they all financially contribute to will not be used to undermine their rights or support unconstitutional activities. With that said, we would like to get just a little bit further clarity on how these guidelines will be actively enforced across city agencies. We've also heard from community members across the city that they would like easier access to information on how their rights are being protected by our government. And we hope that part of the successful passage of this bill would include a public education component, including multilingual signage in city agencies and rec centers, highlighting existing protections and legal resources available for Baltimore residents that are currently threatened by our government, our federal government. And relatedly, we want to make sure as we begin the budget process that our city's budget reflects the need for both access to legal services and wide access to these Know Your Rights materials. But with that said, truly thank you all, council members, for your efforts and for actually hearing and addressing the needs of your residents and of our city.
Thank you, Sergio. Next up, we have Alex Lazaro.
My name is Alex Lazaro. I live in Baltimore City, District 5. I'm submitting this testimony on behalf of Jews United for Justice in support of Bill 26144. Jewish values insist that we turn our historical experiences of being outsiders in foreign lands into compassion for those enduring the same today. We're obligated to make sure that those of us who are not born in our community are as safe as those who were. Federal agents are assaulting, arresting, and disappearing immigrant Marylanders. There is reason to believe the crisis will deepen. I've been volunteering in support of immigrants since I retired in 2018. I've taught computer, job search, English, and library skills. A man who was in my first computer class is a torture survivor with long-term physical disabilities as a result of the torture. He followed all legal pathways to permanent residency and was living a stable life. Last summer, ICE agents dragged him out of his car as he was on his way to work, even as he told them he had legal status. In the chaotic assault, he was forced to leave behind his car, his job, and his life in Baltimore. He's still in detention without adequate medical care. 2 weeks ago, a Central American woman went to check in at Hopkins Plaza and didn't return home. She too was sent to a detention facility in the South, torn from her husband and 2 small children without warning to any of them. Enforcing the requirements for judicial warrants and prohibiting racial profiling could provide some protection for immigrants trying to navigate daily life. Establishing policies and procedures for the police department's interactions with ICE will certainly protect citizens, especially with the bill's de-escalation measures. We at Jews United for Justice respectfully urge council members to support this bill. Additionally, as we approach this year's budget season, please ensure there is adequate funding for direct services to our immigrant community. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we have Cindy Ogide. There we go, I got it right.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Public Safety Committee. My name is Cindy Ogide, and I'm the Health and Social Service Manager at CASA. In my role, I oversee our partnership with Safe City, Baltimore Tier 3, which provide rapid responses services, coordination of legal representation, and case management support for families impacted by immigration detention. Through this work, we are often the first call family make when a loved one has been taken by ICE. Over the past year, we have seen a sharp increase in immigration detention across Baltimore City. People are being detained while dropping their children off to school, outside of grocery store, while heading to work, or even outside places of worship. Just a few months ago, we could somewhat anticipate when these calls might come in. Now, we are receiving calls at all hours of the day, every day of the week, families describing aggressive and frightening tactics during these arrests. But the harm does not stop with the individual detained. Every detention creates a ripple effect of trauma. Children suddenly lose a parent, family lose their primary breadwinner, community become gripped with fear. Parents become afraid to leave their home to buy food, attend medical appointments, or participate in their children's education and activities. We are seeing families forced further into the shadow simply because they are trying to live their daily lives. The Safe Space and Community Act has the potential to provide an important layer of protection for Baltimore community members. By setting clear boundaries on how city agencies interact with federal immigration enforcement, this bill helps ensure that residents can access public service and community space without fear. For the family we serve, this bill represents more than policy. It represents hope, safety, and dignity. I urge the City Council to pass the Safe Space and Community Act. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Cindy. We're going to do one more piece of testimony, and they'll be joining us virtually. I've got Dr. Stephen Kane. Dr. Kane?
Excellent. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Public Safety Committee. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Dr. Stephen Kane, and I'm a board-certified family medicine and general preventive medicine public health physician. And I currently serve as the medical director of a health department-operated jail medical system in one of the larger U.S. cities in the United States. Unfortunately, not Baltimore, although I have called the city home for many years. I have direct clinical and programmatic experience with carceral healthcare delivery, communicable disease control in congregate settings, and the national standards that govern carceral medicine. My views today represented are my own, and today I'm asking for you to adopt Council Bill 26-0144. I'm here today because of the concerning conditions that were described in the preceding community members and EMT's testimony and supported by previous documented media stories. It is the predictable and documented consequence of operating a carceral facility outside the framework of recognized medical and public health standards. I like to briefly speak to what those standards are and why those conditions represent a threat not only to community members held inside, but to the broader Baltimore community as well. Two sets of standards govern what should be happening in the Fallon Federal Building with regards to public health and medical care. The first is the National Commission on Correctional Health Care, the NCCHC, which sets the recognized benchmark of care for incarcerated and held populations in the United States. ICE's own policy directs each facility to strive for NCCHC accreditation. The second, and critically, is ICE's own National Detention Standards, the NDS, which are operational requirements for every ICE-operated facility. Both frameworks are fairly explicit. People held in these facilities must have access to care equivalent to quality to what any person in the community could receive. Under NCCHC standards, a facility must maintain a sanitary environment, provide timely sick call, manage communicable disease through identification, isolation, and treatment protocols, and ensure the presence of qualified medical personnel at all times. The NDS, ICE's own rules, go further and are more specific. NDS Standard 4.3 requires that every person held receive an initial medical, mental health, and dental screening within 12 hours of arrival. It mandates TB screening for all new arrivals prior to placement in general population, which is consistent with CDC guidance, and development of written communicable disease management plans. And it requires medical staff to perform basic exams and treatment for all people held. What was described at the Fallon Federal Building does not approach these standards. It violates both frameworks categorically. Allow me to be a little more specific about the risk. Firstly, lack of access to medical care, even for a short period of time during detention, can lead to catastrophic outcomes. Imagine a community member living with diabetes and is dependent of insulin that without medical treatment could end up in a hospital or worse within a matter of hours or days. Overcrowding, as described, is precisely the set of conditions under which respiratory pathogens amplify. Tuberculosis, influenza, COVID-19, and unfortunately in 2026, even measles in some states, all transmit more efficiently in poorly ventilated, densely occupied spaces. A facility that holds high volumes of people from diverse geographic origins without performing intake, health screenings, or verifying vaccination status is functioning as an unmonitored amplification site. Furthermore, inadequate sanitization and lack of access to adequate bathroom facilities is a breeding ground for infectious gastrointestinal illness. Carceral facilities do not exist in public health isolation. When those individuals are transferred, released, or transported to area hospitals, the pathogens travel with them. Detainees cycle in and out of the community. Staff go home every night. Baltimore will bear the downstream public health burden of those actions. It's clear to me that this agency is acting without regard to public health or medical standards, endangering the lives of those it detains in the greater Baltimore community. Baltimore cannot support these practices. Council Bill 26-0144, at its core, is a public health and human rights measure. By prohibiting city entities from entering into agreements to house people on civil immigration holds, restricting the use of city resources for immigration enforcement, and requiring data governance practices that protect individuals from immigration-based discrimination, this bill shuts down the pipeline to detention in such circumstances and reduces the city's exposure to the public health consequences I have described. I urge this committee to adopt Council Bill 26-0144, and thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kane. I want to say this because I think it was really important that we provided the opportunity to hear directly from people who are feeling and experiencing this the most and experts that appreciate this work the most, because I think it should couch the conversation that we're having here and the proposed amendments or bill considerations that are before us today. If we don't remember at the end of the day, we are potentially participating in atrocities. We are missing the picture here. So I just want to thank everybody who took the time to come and to testify. We're going to have more testimony after we hear from the agencies and have an opportunity to ask questions about where they stand on the bill. I want you guys to know that we as a council are doing everything that we can, and I want to thank the sponsors for bringing this forward because this is an incredibly important time, and this is an incredibly important bill for what we are able to do from the City Council at this time. With that, I'm going to kick it off to our agencies, starting first with the Police Department.
Good afternoon, Erin Murphy, Director of Chief of Staff and Government Affairs for Baltimore City Police Department. We have in our bill report that obviously BPD already has a policy on this. So what we had said, what we're favorable on the report, but we would like it to mirror the policy language. I do understand there's been amendments to try to come up with some language that helps us do that. So we stand by our report.
Thank you, Erin. Next, I've got the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Catalina Rodriguez Lima, members of the council, we stand by our report.
Thank you. I've got the Law Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hillary Ruley on behalf of the Law Department. We stand by our bill report. We've worked with the sponsors of the bill and we approve their amendments for form and legal sufficiency, and they address the legal issues in our bill report.
Thank you. Next, I've got the Department of Finance.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of committee. Gabriel Stewart-Sikowitz for the Department of Finance. We defer to the Law Department on this issue.
Thank you. Next, I have the Office of Equity and Civil Rights.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Tyler Chanel, Mayor's Office on behalf of OECR. They stand by their bill report. I will note, I just sent a message to Council Services. We submitted the reports yesterday, but they're not on the bill file for some reason. But OECR stands behind their report, and hopefully they can be published today.
I appreciate it. We don't have a quorum here to vote this out, so it gives folks enough time. So, thank you. All right, I will open to questions of the agencies, sponsors, and otherwise. I've got a question, and this is for the Law Department. I proposed an amendment. That would prohibit the city from allowing ICE to stage on city-owned properties. And the feedback I got was a little bit wiry. Can you talk to me about the decision that came from the Law Department on that piece? Essentially, and I'll explain what it does, it reads to that we would not allow immigration officials to use any space owned, leased, operated, or controlled by the agency, including a park, a recreational area, or any other public facility for the purpose of staging, coordinating, planning, or conducting an immigration enforcement action. And the thoughts behind this is, once again, I think we've talked here about the atrocities that we're hearing from ICE. And I think we want to make it crystal clear that our city government, certainly our police department, but then any other city agency will not participate in that activity. But there's a little pushback on this piece. If you can help walk me through the law departments.
Yeah, I gave you the legal analysis last night, but basically we have no problem with the city facilities language, but a park is a, public forum. We don't regulate anything in a park based on the speech the people are going to use or the actions or associations they would have. So we wouldn't be able to have a law that said if somebody came for a permit to the park for their use, we would be denying them access based on their speech. I don't know that ICE would even come and ask for a permit. I doubt that they would do that. So, but the reality is you can't make a law that's based on someone's speech or associations, and that's, the heart of the First Amendment. So that was the concern, not for the whole amendment you proposed, but for the part that goes farther than what's in the bill right now and singles out those places that are traditional public forums like parks. There's plenty of reasonable time, place, and manner. There's no issue with places that are, limited public forums like the council chambers or other places like that. But when you talk about a park, we can't, have legislation that would single out people based on their expressive content in the park, no matter how much we would hate it.
So you're saying that ICE enforcement is protected under free speech?
No, I'm simply saying that we can't. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law impacting free speech. It's applicable to the states through the 14th Amendment, and this would be a law based on the speech you're using in a park. And right now, we don't grant park permits based on what you plan on speaking or saying there. So that would be the issue.
So I have here the executive order from the mayor, and it states, the Department of Housing and Community Development, Department of Real Estate, and any other city agency with authority over a physical property shall not allow any city-owned or city-controlled property, including but not limited to city-owned buildings, parks, parking lots, and any interior or exterior portion thereof to be used as an unpermitted staging area, processing location, or operation space for any similar purpose, in furtherance of civil immigration enforcement operations unless federal officials have obtained a valid court order or judicial warrant. And this was approved by the department, by the city solicitor. How is this different?
It's not a law.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That says everything I need. Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The law department also had asked us for an amendment on something that that is treated similarly. We had initially put in this bill that we wanted any entity that gets money from the city to be able to comply with this. And we're told we can't do that. So we changed one of our amendments is to change everything from covered entity to agency, so it's clear it's all of our agencies, but took out the notion of the fact that we have the third-party issue. And some other feedback came to us about third-party vendors and things like that. So we're trying to figure out how to handle that as well. Because the BOE handles contracts, we're thinking that there could be some way to, have some sort of resolution or something from us for unanimous consent saying we expect or we want the BOE to make sure that there's certain things in contracts moving forward, not now, but moving forward, because we can't right now, although with the changes in the charter, we're thinking about that different, but be able to do that. So I just wanted to point that out. But we do have in this bill that, first of all, every agency would go through this, but we took out the third party part of this. And then my question actually is for MEMA. Currently, we modeled this bill a lot off of also the language access, which we all worked on very significantly together, and wanted to hear from MEMA about some of what your process has already been thus far relative to language access that would provide the public and the committee how you plan on working with each of the agencies to comply with this bill.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So our language access process legislation was based on existing work in our office that had taken years for us to create a framework, which was informed by the federal government, which no longer exists. And so we had the benefit of testing the operations of that particular program so that we could come to the City Council with a very refined legislation. And as you know, in that particular part of our work, agencies have to commit to certain criteria. Training is one of them. We have training in Workday. We get monthly updates from HR on the number of employees taking the training. So we are likely to replicate some of those models should this legislation pass and strengthen the tools and resources for city employees, which is part of our role as a technical assistance provider to increase capacity across city agencies so that residents can be served.
Just as a follow-up, so that would be the process that you're going to go through with this bill as well, is making sure that the general policies are followed, and then each entity would come up with, again,
Absolutely.
like I said earlier, the fire department is different than a rec center, but that each one would have the general policies.
Absolutely. If passed, what would be really helpful for us, given our limited capacity, is to create a standard process across agencies for us to meet certain criteria and replicate some of the work that we've learned through language access as well, which also involves the training of employees.
And the training is deployed through one-on-ones as well as a training that's on our HR platform. Is that correct?
for language access is mainly through Workday, but it's part of a very extensive onboarding process that we hold agencies accountable for a period of 6 months, where we meet with the language access liaisons, as you know, on a monthly basis, and we emphasize the role of training in a way that we see that is through our language line bill, like our telephonic interpretation bill, and whether that's being used or not.
Thank you. I have a question for BPD, but okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I first of all, very much appreciate the time that we've spent with BPD on this, and obviously BPD was proactive even before all this was coming up to create this policy that we have here in our bill, but also that has been articulated. If you're not comfortable saying it totally publicly, but I hope you are, because I think people need to know. Can you tell us very specifically what the duties of BPD are if there is something happening that BPD is called to, either by the public or by an enforcement official?
Oh, I mean, I think the policy is very expansive. It has been gone through, like we said, the consent decree. We've worked with MEMA and other people. The commissioners come out and said, we do not cooperate with ICE. We are not part of any immigration enforcement. We've spoken, the council's spoken. I think it's important that the public knows we're going to be working with the mayor's office for messaging so people can really understand what BPD can and cannot do. I think it's important for the public to know that and to know what we are doing. But what the only time that we have interacted with ICE has been if it is come in as a 911 call for assistance. But BPD is not working in the immigration capacity, but we are going to put together messaging with the mayor's office to make it clearer to the public.
And please, utilize us for that as well. We get a lot of the questions.
Absolutely.
And we want to be sure to have that opportunity. I will yield to any of my other colleagues before continuing with my questions.
Any other questions? Councilman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, agency partners, for being here. Director Rodriguez, and this may be for you, Tyler, as well. I know touching on multiple things. It's good to see you, sir. I know that the city administrator in the fall published a policy that directed agencies to develop plans for how they will limit city government access to city government facilities to immigration enforcement officers. And my understanding of that is that part of the technical support and responsibility for that was given to MEMA as well. Are there any updates? It's been a few months. Are there any updates on that progress? The bill obviously calls for and echoes that same sort of call. Any updates either from MOGR or from MEMA about how that work is going and anything we've learned so far from those efforts?
It's been a collaborative process between the Department of General Services and the Law Department. The presentations that we've been able to make are welcomed by city employees. Having information on what to do if ICE officials come to their buildings has been really helpful. We did not anticipate the level of administrative support that is needed, which is limited in our office. As you know, we are a small but mighty shop. And so we welcome any resources where we could take this to the next level and make sure that every city employee is informed about the city administrator's guidance, which was issued along with the mayor last year, instructing city employees and agencies to prohibit ICE from coming into city facilities without a judicial warrant.
Thank you, Madam Director. Similarly, I'm curious, and I know it's, again, you point out the size of the office and how much good work you're able to do for our communities, even with those very real practical limitations. As we think about the ways, and we've heard this from testimony, we hear more about it from testimony, but as we think about the ways that not only the increase in ICE enforcement, immigration enforcement, but the change in that, the 11-fold increase in street detentions as opposed to in more controlled spaces, the huge increase, I think 6 or 7-fold increase in the number of people without any criminal convictions who've been arrested, just the changing nature of that. Is there any, we hear anecdotes, we see some numbers, in terms of the impact on our city economically, educationally, civic engagement, access to service, access to city services, things like that. Is there any data that you all are tracking to help have some sense of the cost or the impact, recognizing that you are deep into the helping people every single day and that data collection and maybe beyond that? But is there anything in particular that you're looking at or noticing, or that other parts of the city are trying to track to have some sense of what the cumulative impact of this relentless pressure on our communities is?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. As part of our Safe City Baltimore project, which provides community education, legal services for non-detained, and legal services for detained individuals, if I'm not mistaken, we do collect data on the folks who are detained and the lost revenue in that particular case. So I have to get back with you on whether we collect that or not, but we do keep an eye on that because oftentimes they're the head of household and breadwinners. Reason why we provide financial assistance for those left behind. But we do also keep track of individuals impacted in the city of Baltimore who live in the city of Baltimore. As you may know, a lot of the data provided by ERO and by other projects is based on Baltimore numbers, which capture the entire state. So sometimes it's very difficult for us to use those numbers to determine whether those are city residents. Through Safe City Baltimore, we capture a ton of information to give us a profile of the folks who need attorneys, for the folks who have been arrested, in the communities that are primarily impacted through national events.
Thank you, Director. A final question for the Baltimore Police Department. One of the things we've seen, and I'm not saying this for your benefit because you know it very well, one of the things we've seen with this federal government is that they are willing to explore or exploit or try to identify any kind of weakness or any sort of legal nooks and crannies in order to bypass the clearly stated policies and protections that states and localities have put in place in order to advance their agenda, whether it's hatred towards, hostility towards our Black and brown communities, whether it's hostility towards our gay, lesbian, and trans neighbors, whether it's hostility, in this case, towards our immigrant neighbors. The question I have in particular for you all is, I fear that one of the places where that gets complicated here in the city of Baltimore is in multi-agency task forces, which pull from federal and state and local agencies. And I suppose I'm anxious that that's kind of it's both incredibly important for the safety work that we're doing in our communities, and also because the federal government is advancing an agenda that isn't about our public safety. I fear that that's maybe a vulnerability for us that the federal government is attempting to exploit. So I'm curious if you just speak a little bit to those spaces, how they have changed under this administration, and how we're protecting our communities in those spaces.
Hi, this is Hillary Ruley from the Law Department. I don't have any particular facts around these kind of multidisciplinary task forces. I imagine it's kind of fact specific. We might have something in one context and we don't in another, but honestly, I'm really not the person to ask. I don't know if there's someone, if you're meaning more law enforcement, then that would be more BPD.
Yeah. Law enforcement, yeah.
There is part of our policy, 1021, talks about task forces, but it isn't. It says, however, under no circumstances does a BPD member, whether assigned to a task force or not, have the authority to enforce administrative violations of immigration law. So it is in our policy. I am obviously a civilian, so I can't tell you specific things about our task forces, but I mean, the commissioners made it clear. That is not something we are sharing. That is not something we're participating in, but our participation in task force are critical to public safety.
Yeah.
So we have I have not been alerted to any sort of issues by the law department or anything else, that we have entered into any agreements that are violating our policy about immigration. So that's the best I can answer for that.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt about our intentions and our decision making. It's more the bad intentions and the lack of honesty and transparency on the part of our partners who may be in those rooms with us. And so I appreciate the commitment of BPD that's been steadfast to say this is who we are, no matter what your agenda is. This is what we're here to do, and which is to achieve safety for our communities. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a follow-up to that line of questioning. So let's take an example that there's a federal agency, which I won't name right at the moment because this happened, is executing a warrant that BPD has asked them to do, because that happens, right? There's collaboration, right, to do that. And it happens to be that there are, there may be some folks in the House or something that, they decide that may not necessarily be, so they basically, the federal agency conducts an immigrant action even though it didn't start that way, right? And I'm just making this part up, but I'm just wondering about the scenario, whether or not if BPD is there, do we just walk away? Like, how does that actually work?
So I would, again, be the wrong person to be answering what goes down at a house or a takedown. I can just tell you that, our position is we are not going to be involved in any actions like that, but we're also going to make sure, which we have, and we had an incident in the Southeast where, they were serving a warrant, and the officer did everything right. It is in our policy that we make sure that there is a valid warrant, but I can't speak to like a specific situation if it starts one way and ends up another. I can just tell you that is, again, and we're going to make sure that the public understands, BPD is not going to be participating in immigration activities.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was probably an unfair scenario, but I'm just trying to think of all the different scenarios that could come up, and what the training will be able to provide both for our residents, for the BPD, and also for our communities, just to try to think of all the possible scenarios that there could possibly be to move forward, and maybe we can have a follow-up conversation about that. So I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, do you want me to go through the rest of the amendments, or how do you want to handle?
Any other questions? Please go for it.
Thank you. So we have 3 amendments in the sponsor package. The first looks super long, but it's got a couple of things in there. One is that we are deleting any language relative to covered entity. And remember, we created this bill similar to language access, but there are some differences. And so we wanted to just be super, super, super clear that we're deleting references to covered entity. So from line 10 to line 15, and then taking away the language about a third party, which we're going to solve in a different manner. And then also these lines 16 to 18, which talks about a direct public service. That's really from the language access bill, because language access was really, the first emphasis is really on the front-facing agencies. So we wanted to be very clear, and MEMA had suggested in their bill report to strike that so that we're working with all of the agencies. So anywhere you see public or covered entity, that has been changed to agency of city government. We also have clear language in the part of the bill that talks about the enforcement immigration enforcement action plans, which is on page 4, that in conjunction with MEMA, an agency shall create and adopt, and that allows for MEMA to really again, set the policy just as we have done here, work through them, and work through the agency plans to make sure that they're consistent in policy, and then in their specifics, again, similar to what they've done with language access. Mr. Chair, you had pointed out, this is amendment number 2, you had pointed out an error that we did not see, and I appreciated that you picked it up, and it was consistent with the BPD policies. Page 6, line 24. This is the part of the BPD that says the department may not engage in, assist, or support immigration enforcement action unless the department is required to execute a criminal warrant or court order issued by a federal or state, and we changed court to judge, which is, so I appreciated that you pointed that out to us, and also that it's consistent with the policy. So we just wanted to put that in there, so that's in there. And then the last piece is on page 7. This is the list of sort of the procedures that BPD will go through if they find themselves interacting with immigration officials. 1 through 4 is consistent with the current policy. Number 5, 1 through 3 is consistent with the department policies. Number 4 says request and document the immigration officials' law enforcement credentials, which is what we want. We want the agency to say, hey, what agency are you with? What are you doing? What's your name? All of that. This part about verifying their identity by requesting they remove the mask is not in the policy, and so we're taking that out. We believe that it's also being covered at the state level with the bill that the state is passing relative to masks. So it doesn't need to belong here, and that way, again, we're trying to make this as clear as possible. But again, the state level law about masks will cover this, so we didn't feel like we needed to do this. So that's our list of amendments, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I just do want to point out one thing. We do have one item in here that is slightly, I think it clarifies what BPD's role is relative to an immigration enforcement action, and it says, this is on page 6, line 27, about de-escalation. The department may be present at a scene of an immigration enforcement action to de-escalate on any direct threat to life or public safety. And I will admit that this language right here is not directly in the policy. However, it is, I think, a basic procedure of BPD already, that when they are, in a place where they need to de-escalate, that they de-escalate. And that it's not just about, calming down sort of the protesters and leaving the scene. It's really also about if somebody calls 911 and says, hey, this is happening, that they're there to keep public safety, and that's something that they would do in whatever situation. So I know that there's been some dialogue about this language, about whether or not we have to do something different. I actually think it's very much similar to what they would do in any situation, and we're just making it explicit here so that the public's very clear also about what they need. So I wanted to point that out and be public about that one particular piece. But otherwise, we have our amendments and submit them to the committee for consideration, and happy to have my colleagues chime in if there's anything else, but I wanted to just explain that piece as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos. We don't have a quorum to vote on this bill today, unfortunately. And so we'll have to do some work behind the scenes to make sure that we move this bill as quickly as we can. This is a very high priority for this committee and personally for myself, noting what is going on, noting that we're seeing a rise in ICE agents in this city and in this region. And I want to make it crystal clear for folks that are not clear about where Baltimore stands on that increase in activity. We don't support it. So appreciate you. I had a couple amendments that we've been in contact about, and I think you've largely adopted them. I think there's one we'll have to revisit. But I want to make sure we work out all the details because we can't vote here today, so that we can hit the nail on the head when we have an opportunity to bring this to a vote. I understand Councilman Blanchard has a brief statement he wants to make, and then we're going to go to public testimony.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say briefly, I think probably everyone in here knows how incredibly important this is, and I can't state it any better than what the bill sponsors, yourself, the council president, the agencies, all of the public testimony we've gotten. And I'll just say that I recognize that, like, this is a lot of things are happening, and we've got a lot of people trying to be legally creative to find solutions here. And there's a lot of things happening on the state level. There's a lot of things happening out in the courts, and there's a lot of things that obviously we're trying to do. So I just appreciate all the work that all of my colleagues and the agencies are making to, like, we're not gonna agree because there's so much going on. We're all trying to do this very important work in a very fluid environment. So the boring aspect of the details of this, which is not the big blue air of what's going on, but what we as legislators do have to figure out is appreciate the work that's being done here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, we're going to go back into public testimony. We have a long list here. I want to thank you guys for being patient in the first half of public testimony and, of course, the back and forth with the agencies. Next up, I have Calvin Lynn. Thank you, Calvin. Next up, we have Buzz Grambo. Turn on the microphone. If you press the button on the right, it'll turn red. Bingo.
Thank you for granting me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Buzz Grambo. I'm a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer and your neighbor. I would like to acknowledge that what I plan to say today has changed due to the news of the Legionella outbreak. Some of the people here may already know me and what I'm about. I've been in the Baltimore Beat, the Baltimore Banner, Mother Jones, the Banner Again, a paper in Amsterdam I can't pronounce, and I don't even know where else. I asked my congressman to do each of those, and he declined. So here I am speaking again. I'm here in support of this legislation. It needs to happen immediately. Please don't allow this to get bogged down in legislative process and hearings to discuss best training programs. Pass this now, and I will deliver it by scooter. I am here to say that we need more. I just saw Senator Van Hollen again asking where the missing migrants are. I've been asking this question for months. We have a concentration camp just a few miles from where our national anthem was written. This isn't Baltimore. Why do I hear the letters BG and E more than I hear the letters DHS and ICE? We all know everything is unaffordable. Where are the social media campaigns saying, we don't want ICE here, we aren't Nazis? I see our leaders endorsing each other, so happy with the work instead of listening to the new voices in the community actually taking action. Stop it. We need to see more of our leaders in the streets with us. Councilwoman Ramos, Councilmember Conway, Councilman Parker, thank you all. I see you a lot. The fact that I was in Senator Van Hollen's office thanking him for his work while the press conference at the Baltimore ICE facility was going on tells me we need more coordination between our leaders and the activists in the streets. Just Saturday, I was threatened with arrest by ICE agents again. I still haven't heard anything about the agent that assaulted me, and he's still roaming our streets. I'm pretty sure that was a crime, and I have it on tape. They drive around our city in unmarked cars like it's Mario Kart. Can we have local police start enforcing basic traffic laws? Can we have Baltimore police start seeking out these agents to document their abuse and ensuring our rights are protected? We're discussing new laws when they don't even follow the current laws on the books. No one wants to live in a city where the residents feel responsible for their own safety. So again, I'm here in support of this legislation, but Hitler didn't start gassing people on day one. We need more. We need to be moving faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Buzz. Next up, we have Marta Mills.
Good afternoon. My name is Marta Mills, and I'm with Indivisible Baltimore. It's a grassroots pro-democracy group, and we have about 2,500 members here in the city. Thank you so much for sponsoring this bill. This is just what we need, but in my opinion, we need more. And as Buzz said, probably faster. They're here, they're doing a lot of damage already. There are a couple of ideas I have where I'd like to see more specificity in the bill. The first is, what exactly will police do to protect all of Baltimore's people, as you said, from including legal observers and anti-ICE protesters, from their sometimes brutal ICE tactics. We don't want another Alex Preddy or Renee Good here. We can't afford that. Also, this is sort of a question to the legal department. Can you add to the bill if local prosecutors can charge federal immigration officers who break the law? Possibly address something I read about and had never heard of before, the Supremacy Clause immunity doctrine. So thank you so much. I urge speedy passage of this bill.
Thank you, Marta. Next, I've got William Herman.
I'm not William Herman. William Herman is my spouse, but he went to feed the meter.
We can come back to him.
Okay.
I'll come back to him. Next, I have Lucy Pollard. Lucy Pollard. All right. Next, I have Crisely de los Santos.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Crisely de los Santos, and we are CASA's Baltimore and Central Maryland Director, and also CASA is a proud member of the CJSJ Coalition. This bill is extremely important to me as an Afro-Latina who lives in Baltimore City. And as most of you are aware, CASA responds daily to ICE arrests throughout the country, but my team is in charge of responding to arrests in the region. And I'm sure it's no surprise that here in Baltimore City, we see the largest number of arrests from our nearby counties. Our immigrant community shows the incredible courage and resilience every single day, despite the trauma that they are going to. We have folks showing up to our center daily to ask how they can open a business, how they can show up for their members, for their community members, and even asking if they could join local ICE Watch group, despite of what their immigration level might be, so putting themselves at risk to support their immigrant neighbors. And I think this is what Baltimore is about. It's about showing up for our neighbor and fighting for each other's dignity and respect. The Safe Space and Community Act is a critical step for immigrant families in this region, understanding that even folks who don't live in Baltimore City would be benefited by this. We strongly urge you to pass this legislation as soon as possible because our families don't get to choose if they have 1 or 2 more weeks. And also to ahead of the FY27 budget session to make sure that there's additional funding for wraparound services, education, and legal resources. We have already shared with some of you our feedback on the amendment, but just to share, we strongly agree with Amendment 3 and 4. And we shared back some feedback around some of similar legislation in other counties. But just want to say and applaud you for your efforts because I think this is the most comprehensive Trust Act policy that we've seen in the state of Maryland. So thank you so much for everything you do and to stepping up to meet the moment.
Thank you, Crisely. Next up, we have Cindy Baez.
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy and I live in District 12. Members of the Public Safety Committee, thank you for having the moral courage to write this necessary bill. I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 260144, the Safe Spaces and Communities Act. All people that call Baltimore City home deserve to be protected against discrimination, intimidation, and harm, including immigrants. For nearly 2 years, I was a parent coach for immigrant mothers of toddlers. I happily carried a cart full of toys, visiting families for playtime all throughout District 1 every day. District 1 became my second home, but since spring 2025, seeing videos of my neighbors be brutalized on the street by masked men has become the norm. Across the street from the bus I'd take home, in front of the grocery store where I shopped, in front of the very pediatric clinic where the families I worked with were going to receive care so that their children could live happy, healthy lives. These families now hide away in fear. This bill is a start, in order to help immigrant families feel safer to go to the pediatrician, to school, to the park, to the library, to live life without fear because we are all worthy of our dreams. I endorse this bill and I urge you to pass it into law, but it is just a start.
Thank you, Cindy. Next, I have Marilyn Carsley. Marilyn Carsley. Next, I have Vincent Tola.
Good afternoon. My name is Vince Tola. I'm an ESOL teacher at Patterson High School in East Baltimore. I'm a BTU member and a resident of Highlandtown. I've taught at Patterson every school year since 2010. It's my home and my community. At Patterson, we have a wonderfully diverse staff and student population. We have speakers of Arabic, Swahili, Tigrinya, Tagalog, Spanish, Yoruba, and other languages. Nearly half the student population was born outside of the United States or come from households where a language other than English is spoken at home. And I think that anyone who has been part of this community recognizes its value. There is beauty, there is strength, there is opportunity when you have diversity and you embrace it. You can build off the assets that these students and their families bring. And when you do that, you strengthen Baltimore. I want to thank the council for passing the resolution calling for an end to 287G partnerships and requiring federal officials to take off their masks. That was a few weeks ago. I also support bill number 26-0144. I like that it prohibits city agencies from allowing immigration officials to enter their spaces unless otherwise required to do so by law or from a judicial order. It also requires city agencies to put a plan in place that instructs their staff to engage, how to engage with immigration officials. It prioritizes safety and community. Baltimore police will be able to be present during immigration enforcement actions and de-escalate situations. This could save lives. It also is a signal to Baltimore's immigrant communities that you're welcome here. And I think most of us here feel solidarity with immigrants in the United States. Maybe we come from an immigrant family. My grandfather immigrated to New York City from Ecuador in the 1950s. He wanted to learn English so as to improve his business skills. I have a lot to say, but I'm gonna try to cut it a little short. But back when my grandfather immigrated, it was much easier to come through a legal route. People just haven't had those opportunities in the past 25 years. Those have showed up to on our southern border. And I wanna close by saying that, we immigrant solidarity advocates, we need to demand more of our federal officials and anyone who is running for Congress who wants our support. We need We need to tell them, you need to pass comprehensive immigration reform. We need expanded legal pathways. We need pathways to citizenship. We need to end mass undocumented status. And there's a bill that does that, H.R. 3194, the U.S. Citizenship Act. We could ask Congressman Fume to reintroduce that bill, and that the next Congress, which is gonna be much better than the current one, can pass it. And I think that, and I appreciate the work that's being done, but we need to demand more of our federal officials. And finally, I just want to say that we need to abolish ICE. This is not simply a slogan, it is a concrete policy framework. When you have a rogue, reckless agency that is killing people and harming lives, including American lives, you need to disband it. Break it apart and recreate an entirely new agency that can respect the Constitution. Mass deportation must be over as a policy. Yes, we need an agency at the border that stops people from unlawful entry and that stops drugs and human trafficking, but ICE and Border Patrol in their current forms must be abolished. I have more to say, but I will end there, and I thank the council for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Vincent. Next, we have Samantha Master.
Good to see you again, Councilman Conway. My name is Samantha Master, and I'm a third-generation Baltimorean. I'm also a member of Organizing Black, a Baltimore City-based grassroots organization that is also a part of the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs, or CJSJ. And I come here to you today urging for you to support the Safe Spaces and Communities Act, or Bill 26-0144. This legislation sends a critical message to BPD that no one is illegal, and your job is to do no additional harm to people who are or are perceived as immigrants. We are witnessing a genocide and a re-enslavement project in real time. And as a Baltimore community, we must throw every wrench in the gear of this vicious and wretched system. I know I look young, but my grandfather and his siblings came of age in 1910's Baltimore, and in the shadow of chattel slavery. During that time, another paramilitary agency empowered by the state ran the day, and that organization was called the Ku Klux Klan. And those state agents primarily terrorized another group of stateless people here in Baltimore, Black people. I want to read an excerpt from the Klan's policy position on immigration. They say, "We believe that the U.S. is a European country and that Americans are part of the European people. We therefore oppose the massive immigration of non-European and non-Western people into the United States that threaten to transform our nation into a non-European majority in our lifetime. DHS and ICE's actions are an outgrowth of these ideals and the patterns of violence they perpetuated. We have an opportunity to learn from historical mistakes and offer in word and deed affirmation to our immigrant family that you are wanted and you are welcome. I implore you to pass 26-0144. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Master. Next up, I have Shorty Davis. Shorty Davis. All right. I'll go back around. William Herman. Has your husband come back yet? No? Okay. If there are others that are here and wish to testify, please come forward. If there are folks joining us virtually, in this committee we do allow virtual testimony. Please use the raise hand function by pressing the raise hand function on the bottom part in the WebEx. Seeing no further testimony, we're going to conclude testimony there. Once again, we don't have a quorum to move this bill today. I give you my word, it is my highest priority to move this as quickly as possible. Any of the concerns brought forward, I'm sure we will figure that out in the coming days. But I do think we are in a position to move forward. So I will do my best to make sure that this committee comes together and makes a decision on this bill expeditiously. To that effect, I want to afford a minute to each of the sponsors as we close out. Who's going first? Ladies first, Councilwoman Ramos.
I'll take this one on and then add to my colleagues to do closing remarks.
I'm timing you.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for holding this hearing. And I want to also thank the Law Department and MEMA and the Mayor's Office and Police Department for working with us on this. I want to thank everybody who came today. I know that this is, as you said, and as the Council President said, this is a very high priority for all of us. And it is time that we take action immediately to send a very, very clear message to the federal government, to all of our residents, that what is happening nationally is not accepted, and we don't want it to happen here. They need to go. And we're going to protect our residents as much as we can, as much as we possibly can, whether it's in addition to legislation, but also through organizing, training, support, everything we possibly can. And so stay tuned for more. But I am grateful for this time to have walked through this bill and look forward to hopefully maybe meeting next week so that we can get it into the next meeting.
That's my hope.
Okay, yeah, and let us, I mean, I think the sponsors, we're all on the same page on that, so yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Parker, Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for everyone attending. As my colleague, Councilwoman Ramos said so eloquently, just want to reiterate that this is a city that has always stood up and resisted, and this is a city that will continue to do so, especially with this council. This is a time not only domestically, but internationally where norms are being stepped on each and every day. And so if we don't have people to stand up and say no, whether that is through protest, whether that's through legislation, whether that is through action, we need people to resist. I will continue to stand with my colleagues. I will continue to do whatever we can do to protect all peoples of Baltimore. And I just want to be abundantly clear that this isn't a Hispanic or Latino issue. This isn't an issue that is just subjugated to folks that live in Southeast Baltimore. If this is allowed to happen to anyone, it will happen to everyone. And history has always shown us that.
Councilman Parker, before you go, William is here. Please, William, we're going to open testimony again for you. Sorry, we ran down the clock on your parking.
It's a parking meters dealing with it. I'm here with Baltimore Indivisible, which is Indivisible.
If you could speak into the microphone just so we can hear you. Yeah.
Indivisible is a national.
You can lift it up.
Okay. Indivisible is a national pro-democracy organization. So in Baltimore, we have a Know Your Rights campaign, which I think someone mentioned, and we're going around, it's an education campaign. We're going around to businesses with a whole handful of things, as far as like this, which is very non-committal, nice, everybody's immigrants. But we mentioned judicial warrant, so we're telling them exactly what a judicial warrant looks like versus administrative warrant. And the third thing, which they don't know, there's this called STOP. This is a private space only. So if people have a break room, a back room in the kitchen, ICE cannot come in to that. And we have a lot of other little simple things in English and Spanish. Because people don't, our plan is to educate the employers who can educate their employees that they can remain silent. They don't have to say anything. They don't have to give their name. And most people don't know that. So this is mostly in the Hamden area we've been working on. There was one question I had that I don't know if is on the bill First, thank you for sponsoring this bill. Protecting bystanders, observers, recorders, that I don't know if that is, that the police are going to get in between people, because we have a whole card people should document, and if Renee Good or Alex Preddy hadn't been documented, we would only know their version of it.
So we don't take questions through testimony. It's an opportunity to testify. So I can't answer your question. It's just not how we tend to do this. But if there's a recommendation that you would make on behalf of our consideration, certainly this is an opportunity to do that. And I'm always willing to have a conversation with you after if you think there's something that we can do to address issues like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's basically it. We have a whole bunch of little cards. We pass that to people. So thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, William. I appreciate your steadfastness. We definitely want to hear from you. Councilman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, my colleagues. Thank you to everybody who came out and testified today and who participated in one way or another in this conversation and in urging the passage of this bill. The reality is that, and I appreciate in particular Councilperson Gray for reminding us of the mutuality and the interconnectedness of our city and the way that everything we do here and the way that some of our folks are targeted or maybe targeted in one moment or another impacts all of us. Right, that when one member suffers, we all suffer together with it, and therefore we have a mutual responsibility to speak up, care for each other, listen to each other's stories, and not let anyone be treated as less than or as not belonging, so that together we can advocate for our communities. I think this legislation is a reflection of that, right? It's the work of certainly members of the council and of this committee and of our chairperson. It's building off the work and leadership of MEMA and of our mayor's office and of BPD over many years. And it's rooted deeply in the commitments that our neighbors have made to each other over the years, the way that we have welcomed new people to our communities, the ways that we have made space for each other, the ways in which people from around the world have found space and welcome and opportunity here in our city. And so this bill is one important, but one small piece of that broader frame of resistance and that broader commitment that we have to caring for our neighbors and working for justice for everybody here in our city. So I'm really grateful and recognize that, because I know many of you are involved in that work every single day, whether it's your profession or whether it's your organizational responsibilities, whether it's you as individual neighbors who are volunteering, serving as helping to gather people involved in mutual aid, protesting, speaking out, testifying here, testifying in Annapolis, going out on patrols and watching ICE, joining in protests and that work, that this is one piece of the broader commitment that we make as a city to care for our neighbors and to create and sustain the city that we deserve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilman. We hear you loud and clear. We're here for you. We will bring this to a vote as soon as we possibly can. With that, this hearing is in recess. We'll revisit as soon as we can. Thank you.